Say something out loud right now. Anything. A single word is enough. Maybe you said hello. Maybe you said nothing more than your own name. But the moment you did, something happened somewhere nearby. A bird heard you. Maybe it was a chickadee sitting quietly above your feeder. Maybe it was a sparrow hidden deep inside a hedge. Maybe it was a crow watching from a telephone wire 3 houses away. Whatever bird it was, it heard your voice. And here's the strange part. It probably recognized you. Not your face, not your clothes, not the way you walk, your voice. Have you ever wondered whether the birds around your home actually know who you are? Not as a human, not as a homeowner, but as an individual. Because what birds do, the second they hear your voice, is far more surprising than most people realize. Welcome to Bird Intelligence. Before we begin, I want you to think about one bird, just one. The bird you see most often around your home. Maybe it's a robin, maybe it's a crow, maybe it's a chickadee that visits every morning. Keep that bird in mind throughout this video. And while you're watching, tell me in the comments, what bird do you see most often where you live? I'm genuinely curious, because by the end of this video, you may never look at that bird the same way again. Number 1. What birds actually hear when they hear your voice? Most people assume a bird hears their voice the same way another person would, but that isn't true. In many ways, birds hear far more detail than we do. To a bird, your voice isn't just sound, it's information. Information about your size, information about your mood, information about whether you are familiar or unfamiliar, information about whether you are predictable or unpredictable. When you step outside and say good morning, a bird doesn't simply hear a noise. It hears patterns, it hears rhythm, it hears pitch, it hears tiny details that most humans never notice. A calm voice sounds different from a hurried voice. A relaxed voice sounds different from an angry one. A familiar voice sounds different from a stranger's. And birds notice those differences immediately. In fact, before you even come into view, many birds already know who is approaching. Think about that for a moment. How many times have the birds in your yard heard your voice? Hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Every conversation on your porch, every phone call outside, every time you called your dog, every time you greeted a neighbor, they heard it all. And over time, they began building a picture of you, not unlike the way you recognize a familiar neighbor walking down the street. Now here's a question. If you could know exactly what one wild bird thinks about you, which bird would you choose? A crow, a robin, a blue jay? Let me know in the comments, because some of the answers might surprise us. Number 2. The first 3 seconds after a bird hears your voice. This is the part almost nobody notices. Not because it's invisible, because it's too fast. The moment your voice reaches a bird, something changes. For a fraction of a second, everything pauses. The bird may stop feeding. It may stop moving. It may turn its head. It may freeze completely. Not because it's terrified, not because it's about to fly away, because it's evaluating. Imagine hearing an unexpected sound outside your window. You wouldn't instantly panic. You would first identify it. What was that? Where did it come from? Should I be concerned? Birds do exactly the same thing, only much faster. In that brief moment, the bird asks several questions. Do I know this voice? Have I heard it before? Is this individual predictable? Does this voice usually mean danger, or does it mean nothing at all? And remarkably, many birds answer those questions in less than a second. If the voice is unfamiliar, the bird may increase its distance, a farther branch, a higher perch, a safer position. But if the voice is familiar and consistently associated with safety, something unexpected can happen. The bird may actually move closer. Researchers observing backyard birds have repeatedly documented this pattern. The voice arrives first, the bird responds, and only then does the human appear. Now think about your own yard. Have you ever felt like a bird noticed you before you noticed it? Have you ever walked outside and found a bird already watching you? If that has happened to you, tell me about it below. What bird was it? And what did it do? Because stories like that are far more common than most people realize. Number 3. What different birds do when they hear you. Not every bird responds to your voice in the same way. In fact, some species react so differently that it almost feels like they are listening for entirely different reasons. Let's start with the chickadee. If there is one bird in your yard paying closer attention than you realize, it may be the chickadee. Chickadees are constantly gathering information. Every sound, every movement, every change in their environment. When a chickadee hears a familiar human voice, something interesting happens. It often stops whatever it is doing, not because it is frightened, because it is checking. The bird turns, faces the sound, and pays attention. That small pause tells you something important. The chickadee considers your voice relevant information, not background noise, not random sound. information worth processing. The crow, however, is a completely different story. A crow does not simply hear your voice, it analyzes it. Crows are among the most intelligent birds on Earth, and once they learn who you are, they rarely forget. A crow that has identified you as safe may move closer. A crow that has identified you as dangerous may warn other crows. Imagine that for a moment. Somewhere nearby, a crow may already have an opinion about you, a very specific opinion, and that opinion may have been shared. Now I'm curious, if you could befriend one wild bird species, which would you choose? A crow, a raven, a chickadee, a cardinal? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. Then there are robins. Robins react differently from both chickadees and crows. They pay close attention to activity near the ground. They know that large animals often expose insects and worms. When a robin hears a calm human voice nearby, it sometimes becomes more interested rather than less. A slow-moving human can mean opportunity, food, disturbed soil, freshly exposed insects. But something fascinating happens after months of familiarity. Robins that repeatedly encounter the same person often become noticeably more relaxed. They approach sooner, stay longer, and seem less concerned about that person's presence. At some point, the voice stops being merely information. It becomes familiarity, and familiarity changes everything. Number 4. What your voice does to the entire yard. Most people think a conversation between themselves and a bird involves only one bird, but that isn't what happens. When you speak outside, you are sending information across the entire landscape. A sparrow in the hedge hears it. A chickadee near the feeder hears it. A robin on the lawn hears it. A woodpecker on the tree trunk hears it. A crow on a distant rooftop hears it. And within seconds, dozens of tiny decisions are taking place all around you. One bird turns its head, another pauses, another changes direction, another decides everything is normal. The entire yard updates itself, all because of a single voice. Bird researchers sometimes describe this as an acoustic landscape, a constantly changing map built from sound. And every time you speak, you become part of that map. The birds are answering questions. Where is the human? How close is the human? Moving or standing still? Familiar or unfamiliar? Safe or uncertain? All of that information is processed almost instantly. Then something remarkable happens. The yard returns to normal. The feeding continues. The singing resumes. The movement starts again. And because everything appears normal, most people never realize anything happened. But something did happen. Every bird around you just made a decision about your presence. And that decision was based largely on your voice. Quick question. How long have you lived where you live right now? A few months? 5 years? 20 years? Put your answer in the comments, because the longer you've been there, the more likely it is that local birds have been listening to you for far longer than you imagine. Number 5. The thing your voice does that you never intended. Your voice does something most people never realize. It creates anticipation. Think about a bird that regularly visits your feeder. That bird does not simply learn where the food is. It learns patterns, it learns routines, and eventually, it learns you. When the same person fills a feeder again and again, the birds begin connecting certain sounds with certain outcomes. The sound of a door opening, the sound of footsteps, and perhaps most importantly, the sound of a familiar voice. Some birds begin responding before they ever see the person, before the door opens, before the feeder is filled, before the human even steps outside. The voice arrives first, and the birds prepare. They move to a nearby branch. They stop other activities. They turn toward the house, and they wait. Researchers observing backyard birds have documented surprisingly similar behavior. Birds often react to familiar human sounds before visual confirmation ever occurs. Think about that. A bird sitting in your yard may know you're coming before it actually sees you, not because it can see through walls, because it knows your voice. Have you ever had a bird seem to appear the moment you stepped outside, almost as if it knew you were coming? Maybe a robin, maybe a crow, maybe a chickadee. If you've experienced that, tell me about it below. I read every comment, and some of the most fascinating stories come from moments exactly like that. Number 6. What happens when your voice changes? If birds recognize your voice, then an obvious question follows. What happens when your voice sounds different? Think about the last time you had a cold. Your voice became lower, perhaps rougher, perhaps slower. The rhythm changed, the tone changed. You still sounded like yourself to other people, but not exactly. And birds notice those differences too. Field observers have repeatedly reported something interesting. When a familiar person's voice sounds unusual, familiar birds often behave slightly differently. Not dramatically, not fearfully, just differently. They hesitate longer, watch more carefully, maintain a little more distance. It's as if they're thinking, something is different today. The voice is familiar, but not completely familiar. And then something else happens. When your voice returns to normal, their behavior often returns to normal as well. The caution disappears. The hesitation fades. The birds respond the way they always have, as though they were simply waiting for you to sound like yourself again. That should make all of us pause for a moment, because it means birds are not just identifying people. They are tracking subtle changes within people, changes many humans wouldn't notice. Now think about your own experiences. Have you ever been sick and noticed that a pet reacted differently? A dog, a cat, maybe even a bird? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know whether you've seen something similar, because nature notices more than we often realize. Number 7. The experiment you can try today. Let's test this ourselves. The next time you go outside, try something simple. Stand near your feeder or near the area where you usually see birds. Then do absolutely nothing. No talking, no movement. Just stand quietly for 2 minutes. Watch carefully. Notice where the birds are. Notice how close they come. Notice which birds seem comfortable. Then speak. Use your normal voice. Not louder, not softer, just the voice you always use. And then watch. The next 3 seconds are the important part. You may see a head turn, a pause, a brief freeze, a change in posture, a bird orienting toward the sound. Once you know what you're looking for, you start seeing it everywhere. And here's the interesting part. Try the experiment again another day, but this time, use a voice that isn't yours. Raise your pitch, change your rhythm, speak differently, pretend you're someone else, then watch carefully. Many birds become more cautious. They wait longer, keep more distance, and return more slowly. Why? Because that voice doesn't belong in their memory. It isn't part of the pattern they've learned. To a bird, familiarity matters. Unknown sounds require evaluation. Known sounds require much less effort. And that difference can often be observed with your own eyes. If you decide to try this experiment, come back and tell me what happened. What bird reacted? What did you notice? I'm genuinely curious, because some of the best discoveries happen in ordinary backyards. Number 8. What this says about the relationship you've already built. Most people assume they have a one-sided relationship with the birds around them. They watch the birds ignore them. Simple, but reality may be more complicated. You are part of their world, and you've been part of their world for a long time. Every conversation on your porch, every phone call in the yard, every greeting, every laugh, every word, they heard it, they recorded it, and over time, they built a picture of you, a real picture, not your name, not your occupation, not your personal story, but a consistent identity, a familiar presence, a predictable voice, a known individual. And perhaps the most remarkable thing is this. For many birds, the conclusion they reached about you is probably the same conclusion they reached yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. You are known, you are familiar, and most importantly, you are safe. That relationship didn't happen overnight. It took months, maybe years, thousands of observations, thousands of sounds, thousands of small encounters, and yet you built it without ever realizing it. Before we finish, I have one final question. How long have the birds in your neighborhood been listening to you? 1 year, 5 years, 20 years. Imagine how much information they have gathered during that time. Imagine how many times they have heard your voice. Imagine how many times they have watched you walk outside. And imagine how familiar you must seem to them now. The next time you step into your yard, try something simple. Say hello. Not because the birds understand the words, but because they understand something else. They understand that you are there. Watch the chickadee pause. Watch the robin adjust. Watch the crow turn its head. Watch the tiny reactions happening all around you. Because every one of those birds is running your voice through the file it has built about you. A file created over months, sometimes years, and again and again. Many of them arrive at the same conclusion. That one is known. That one is familiar. That one belongs here. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a bird react to your voice? A head turn, a closer approach, a bird that somehow always seems to know you're coming. And before you go, tell me what bird you see most often where you live. I'm excited to read your answers. Subscribe to Bird Intelligence if you enjoyed this video, because next time we're exploring something even more fascinating. What birds do when they think nobody is watching. And once you learn that, you'll never look at your backyard the same way again.